On this episode of AV Week, we take a look at the polymorphic workplace of tomorrow. Zoom has auto update features and whether or not that's a good idea. And the SEN top 50 integrators globally. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 537, recorded Friday, December 3rd, 2021. Cow spotting.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Atlas IED, innovative audio solutions for every business environment. And by
Atlona, the go-to provider for AV signal distribution and control in corporate, higher education, and residential spaces.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week. First and foremost, her name is Lex Peters. She's fantastic and awesome. She works for USC. Fight On, I believe, is what I'm contractually obligated to say by Mr. Joe Way.
Yes.
She also has her own business helping folks with marketing and stuff like that. So welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Also with us is our buddy and pal, Mr. Brock McGinnis, who I've learned so much from Nationwide up in Toronto. Welcome, sir.
Always good to be here, Tim.
And Brock and I actually, yes, we did. If you're watching the video, we did call each other beforehand and coordinated our matching striped blue shirts. So
Purple.
His is purple, mine is blue. I'm colorblind. Last but not least, Mark Pescatori. Mark is not brand new to the industry. I don't want to missay that, but he is the brand new content director for SCN. So welcome, sir, and welcome, I guess, back to AV.
Thank you so much. Can we throw a Roll Tide in there?
No, sorry. I'm a Bulldog fan. I'm a UGA fan, so I
Well, this has been fun, guys. I want to thank you all for having me here. And
So our buddy Jeremy Glowacki, who used to work at Future, he and I are both UGA fans. So I am enjoying this year. Let's just put it that way.
Absolutely.
If you're not a college football fan, Roll Tide has typically topped the charts, and now they are number 3 now.
Oh well, who knows? All it matters is where we are at the end.
It doesn't matter now, right? Because Mark and I actually get to hang out this week. By the time you're listening to this, it'll be this week. AVNetworkNation.com is where you can find us. He and I are hanging out with our buddy Cindy Davis for a virtual event that we did this time last year. So we're renewing that. All sorts of really great folks coming on to talk with me, with Cindy, with Mark. So you can register there at AVNetworkNation.com. So first story actually comes to us from Mark's fine publication. The yearly SCN top 50 system integrators was published this week. List adds 7 new firms, a couple of interesting pieces. Number one, the first billion-dollar integration firm. I would say the second one as well, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. Technically, they are not listed as $1 billion, but they're getting there. Just like the 2020 list, this list averages out revenue from the last 2 years prior to COVID. Mark, you guys actually listed out the annual revenue, right? From that, it was self-reported. This is, and we'll get to that, why that matters in a second. But the last couple of years, because of COVID and everything, you guys are averaging. Top firm again is AVI SPL with 1.1 billion in revenue. Diversified sits at 900 million. Now, that's the one that I would say, had it been on a year-over-year, they probably would have hit $1 billion. I could be wrong, but they may have, right? The top 5 rounds out with Kinley, AVI Systems, and Ford AV. Applied Global Technologies from Kennesaw, Georgia, is the 50th. The AVI SPL sits at 1.1 billion. Applied, though, is at 10.5 billion, and we'll talk about that kind of spread in a second. Lex, I want to start with you. Lex works for USC, 100% a client, a customer of a lot of these folks. When you look at lists like this, and you look at the top 50 in the U.S. and then actually the top 50 kind of globally now, what does this list do for customers like you when you look at hiring somebody for a job?
Well, to be honest, I feel like I've always really loved lists. And so if I'm looking at like a potential, then I think first of all, I would pick them based on our relationship with them and kind of the discussions we've had together. But this is a good list that kind of solidifies where they are and shows how much work that they've done and how it reflects in their revenue every year. So this is a great way to kind of solidify our choices, but I don't think it's an end all to everything. We're a big believer in underdogs, and I think a lot of companies are doing some really cool things with the UCC technology and everything. So not the end all be all, but this list is so cool, and it's great to see them on it.
Does it introduce you to anybody new? Like you're like, oh, you're looking at the list and number 10 or number 13 or number whatever. I've never heard of them, but maybe I'll check them out. Or does that just not even figure in?
Oh, to me, absolutely. But I'm also pretty new to the industry, coming in on like 5 years, I think. I still have a lot to learn. But I could imagine that my director and the higher ups are quite familiar with a couple of these. But then I also think that, AV is thriving in the pandemic. So I'm sure there are some new ones that are up and coming that we're not as aware of. And that's an exciting opportunity.
All right. Mr. McGinnis, you and I somewhat joke, but it obviously Brock tends to fall around the time that I do this list every year. And we've had this conversation every year. We've had this conversation before. And I mentioned the fact that this is a self-reported list, right? Mark and his team does not have access to financials of AVI Systems or AVI SPL or anybody else. This is self-reporting. This is the first year that I have to make a slight disclosure. I work for CTI. We did not submit, right? So Brock, from your perspective, and you've worked for some that have and some that haven't, why would a company self-report, or why would a company choose not to?
So the choosing to report is easy. This is fantastic marketing. And my LinkedIn feed over the course of the past week has been absolutely filled with people thanking their employees for their dedication and, of course, all the money they made. And it's terrific. I mean, like Lex said, people do love lists, and there are some folks chasing really hard. Personally, I like digging into the details of the list. I typically run a little spreadsheet. I want to find out what people's average installation size is. I want to find out what their revenue per employee is, and to a certain extent, it's cow spotting, because if you can find the cows, you can find the cow patties.
Okay.
Because the business models seem to be very different. A company like AVI SPL averages $111,000 per installation. Diversified, based on their self-reported numbers, averages $36,000 in installation. Well, I know that's not true. Diversified does huge projects all over the world and does them very, very well. But what it says to me is that Diversified is doing a lot of box sales, right? That there's tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that don't impact actual installations. Revenue per employee is a similar thing. But I dig through them. I find new companies. I grieve for the companies that have fallen off or off the list from year to year and been consumed. I actually, spent a lot of years at a company that would have qualified to have been on that list. But like your firm, Tim, no way were we giving our competitors that much information about ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that you just answered the second part of that question, right? Which is, why would someone choose not to? Absolutely. Right. Not that the list is important, and we'll get to Mark in a second, but because it does make great marketing, right? And we mentioned the fact, Brock mentioned the fact that some folks are not on that list. One I'll point out that was consistently on that was HB Communications, which was the most recent acquisition that Diversified made. That if revenue was the same year to year, that's kind of why I said Diversified should have been pushed over a bit over $1 billion, and most likely they'll make it next year, right? They'll make $1 billion next year. So. Mark, we'll bring you in on this. I kind of half jokingly, you did not make this list. You were brought in as it was kind of being made. But one thing that I want to look at for a second is the spread here, right? You have basically roughly $990 million between number 1 and number 50. You have a great spread between number 1 and number 5, quite frankly, right? It's once you get down to that 5 level, you've got, then you're getting to the hundreds, millions, and below. Brock mentioned also the business model. The top 2 are private equity, right? And then you've got AVI Systems is employee owned, right? So you've got a couple different business models here. What do you make of that spread between the 1.1 billion, right, down to 10 million, and the fact that we've got 50 different companies in that spread?
Well, I think it's a good question. And one thing I think it's always important to note, and something both you and Brock have brought up, is the fact that not everybody participates. Okay. Before I took this job, I was in PR, and one of my clients was a systems integrator. And for years, I could not get them to get on this list. They didn't want to share their information. Yeah. Finally, they did, and then I got this gig. So, but that worked out nicely. That wasn't me, but they finally agreed to share their information. But the fact is, a lot of companies aren't on this list because a lot of companies don't want to share that financial information. Again, this is all on the honor system. They're not going to let me go through the books. It'd be cool if they did.
It would be really cool.
But they're not going to let me do that. They're not going to. So it's all on the honor system.
If they ever let you, that's a different conversation, and we're going to have an entire episode on that.
Oh, we're going to have a good time. That'll be a fun time. But the fact is, a lot of people just aren't going to share that kind of information. So when you go from 1 to 50 and you see that jump from $1 billion down to 10 million, it's not that dramatic between 1 and 50 because there's a whole lot more between number 2 and 49.
Thanks so much for watching this first segment of AVWeek. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below or go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.